Bitcoin has broken out to new all-time highs, and in today's video, we're going to be looking at some of the top market cap altcoins, at least the ones that are most often requested. We haven't done this in a while, so we'll start it off with XRP here. XRP, definitely one of the most requested, and we've been looking at this one for a while now. We were looking initially for a move to occur in about mid to late June, somewhere down around 180 to 190-ish region, and then very likely a bounce from there. In fact, XRP did get down to about 190 and did put in a higher low, at least as of right now, which was a really, really good sign. Then we were looking at the very important level of about $2.50 for XRP to trade above. And if it does, then that would effectively, at least for me, confirm that XRP is in a very strong position, ready to, probably make new all-time highs alongside Bitcoin. Now, as you can see, given the price action pivots indicator here on the weekly time frame, we do have something resembling a symmetrical triangle, if you want to call it that. Whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter, but we can make an implied move from this. And for that, I will pull out my trusty tool, and we can see that the implied move would be pointed up towards about, well, your all-time highs on XRP, or I guess close enough to those all-time highs, officially at 335. Again, this is just a sort of estimation. It might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less, but I effectively expect XRP to get somewhere around there on this rally. Are we going to see pullbacks in the short term? Sure, we're not talking about the short term here. We're talking about higher term timeframes only for all of these. So if you are looking at like an hourly time frame, obviously there's going to be ebbs and flows, but generally speaking, I would be looking for XRP to make that move. Now, if we do go to the monthly time frame, I want to point out something that we've been following now for quite some time, and just one of the main things that's kind of been keeping us safe on the altcoins, and now starting to switch around into a very powerful signal, which is the monthly stochastic oscillator. In fact, for XRP, it has been positioned to the downside for the past couple months, and it looks like it's going to have a real chance to cross back onto the upside at the end of this month of July, which would really signal that this move is unlikely to stop, at 335, but probably very likely making new all-time highs by a decent degree, assuming that this one does hold. Now, what's the pivot for that? Effectively, what number does XRP need to close above at the end of July in order to confirm this? Well, that would be 243, which right now is trading significantly above. In fact, that's even above the breakout point that XRP put in from about a week ago. So as long as XRP is above there, all good. I could easily see XRP, having a pullback in the short term if it wants to. I'm not saying it's going to, but if it wants to, anywhere around 2.5, 265 is completely fine. Again, as long as it's really above that monthly pivot, I would be looking for this one to follow through up and to the right. And again, as long as XRP is seeing momentum to the upside and above all major moving averages, I mean, this thing is primed for I would say, significantly new all-time high. In fact, it's probably one of the strongest charts amongst the ones that we're going to be looking at today. Just in terms of relative strength. Quarterly time frame, same thing here as well. We're seeing the highest quarterly stochastic momentum that XRP has ever had, actually, which is generally a good sign. So XRP, just to kind of put it into one sentence, as long as it's above about $2.50, good. And up into the right is the name of the game. With the next sort of major area of interest, pretty much your all-time highs about 335. From there, the traditional ones are the ones that a lot of people are looking at, which I think are going to generally matter here. Is going to be about 420, great number, and then you got $5 plus. So we'll follow up on this one as time goes on. But with Bitcoin doing its thing now, this does seem like it's a time for altcoins in a strong position to make that move. Speaking of strong altcoins, SUI would be the next one on the board here. Not as strong as XRP, as you can see, because it's not as close to its all-time high. But this one's putting in a very similar pattern right here as well. Do you want to call it a symmetrical triangle? Do you want to call it some sort of weird formation? Do you want to even mark this off maybe as some sort of a ascending triangle? I don't really think it matters, to be honest, but ultimately the LARP lines here more or less playing out as this one does reapproach the most important level in the short term, which is this top end price action pivots extension, which is coming in at about 380. So assuming that SUI can close above there. Did I say XRP earlier? Did I say SUI? Well, whatever. If SUI is what we're talking about. If SUI does close above that number, about 380 by the end of this week in 5.5 days, and by the way, I'm recording this this video in advance, so maybe some crazy things happen before then. I don't fucking know, man. I'm going to be on a plane. I'm going to be on a big plane ride, okay? Airplane indicators coming in real fucking hot soon. Real hot. Anyways, if it does close above there, we're going to see not only weekly stochastic momentum continue to the upside, which will happen as long as this thing's above 3.25 actually, but very likely we will look for SUI to at least retest those May highs. That would be about 430-ish region. I do think that SUI would very likely break those highs, maybe not on the first pass, but perhaps on the second or third, whatever it ends up being. I don't think it matters that much. If and when it does, which would be above let's just call it 430. It's a little bit below there technically, but if it could do that by, whether it be this week or next week or the week after that, it doesn't really matter. I would be looking for this thing to retest those prior all-time highs and very likely make new all-time highs from there as well. The monthly time frame here, similar to XRP, is doing two very important things. One, it is potentially about to put in a monthly higher low alongside that weekly higher low and, likely leading into a weekly higher high. But also the monthly stochastic oscillator here is going to have a real chance to flip back onto the upside for the first time since February/March. If this thing can close above the same weekly pivot, again, this would be for the monthly at the end of July, but that would be 3.25 or so. So if you see something like that, very likely this thing will retest all-time highs. Probably has a pretty good shot to make new all-time highs alongside XRP, I would imagine, as well. But like I said, and what I'll continue to say is that, if you are going to be playing the shitcoins, this really does seem like the time of the market cycle that you're going to have the best probability to actually, do decently there, I will say, just generally speaking. Anyways, yeah, SUI here, again, I would say it's kind of second to XRP right now in terms of strength, but I suspect that it very likely will fall through. Again, next major area of interest about 430, or I guess in the short term for this weekly needs to close above about 380. If you see that, next area of interest would be 430. I think it's, again, kind of a foregone conclusion. Whether it does it sooner rather than later, I don't know, but very likely will reclaim that region as well and, head back up above $5. But keep those numbers in mind because we're going to be going on into Ethereum next. Ethereum, I think that really just one chart summarizes it all, one chart to rule them all, and it's a monthly chart here as well. And we've been following this chart for a long time. It's kept us safe on this one generally, and I'm referencing the monthly stochastic oscillator. This one has been to the downside ever since April of 2024. So more than a year, this thing has been positioned to the downside. Since then, obviously Ethereum has not made new highs. It has been generally going sideways and down, going all the way down to 1350 at one point, which is kind of fucking crazy. But as of right now, we're going to see something potentially happen for the first time in over a year at the end of this month, which would be the monthly stochastic oscillator crossing back onto the upside, also playing out what would be effectively a trendline regression test here. And that will happen assuming Ethereum can close the month above 2100. Okay, Ethereum is known to fail given the chance, but I do think that this one, given the circumstances, given the context of the market cycle, this seems like the real opportunity for this thing to actually follow through and put in a real move to the upside, probably back around that $4,000 number. If that monthly stochastic oscillator officially crosses the upside at the end of July, I do think it's, again, nearly a foregone conclusion. You're going to see something around here at least. Personally, I do think Ethereum will at least try 4,000. And I would say, again, it's just hard for me given my sort of like historical reference of Ethereum, generally being like one of the better altcoins, although it doesn't really seem that way anymore. But it'd be very difficult for me not to see it at least try the prior all-time high, maybe slightly make new all-time highs. That'd be amazing. But yeah, the next key level for that conversation would be 4,100. If Ethereum can start to close above there, even on a weekly time frame, it should retest all-time highs. It should really make new all-time highs. I would imagine 6,000 plus would be the name of the game here. But that monthly stochastic oscillator is really the key on this one. As long as that one is positioned to the upside, which right now technically hasn't even crossed the upside, but assuming that it does, and then assuming that it follows through, as long as that's going to be positioned to the upside, I would just generally be looking for this one to go up and to the right, and that's probably your real market. In fact, I'd at least look for the stochastic also to get somewhere around this trendline regression right here, so at least somewhere close at least. So that would imply, you know, some pretty decent upside. I imagine likely new all-time highs. Anyways, moving on from there, I'm gonna replace Solana with Cardano, because the Cardano crew's a little bit more neurotic, a little bit more crazy, a little bit more screws loose in the fucking head. Jesus Christ, man. But because they are so, let's say, enthusiastic, yes, very enthusiastic crypto token enjoyers, we're going to replace Solana with Cardano here. And I mean, the charts are honestly relatively similar in terms of their relative strength. I guess this one's well, this one, I was going to say it's like a little bit weaker, but I mean, they're kind of the same here. Anyways, this one really does have a real chance to actually force its way through. We do see the double green dot of green dildos here, which is going to be a positive DMI signal. And obviously the weekly stochastic also is getting its first cross the upside on bullish divergence here as well. And it remains positioned to the upside as long as Cardano is above 62 cents. Now, technically speaking, right now, it is still on a lower high. So that does make it significantly weaker relatively than something like XRP or SUI, for example. So, you know, if you're playing shitcoin roulette, I guess you really believe in the technology. You know, you got to really believe in the technology here, right? Anyways, we all believe in the technology, right? Yeah, right? Or are we just in it for the money? Nah. I love that tech, bro. Give me that tech. Force that fucking tech down my throat, man. Anyways, yes. So technically right now, yeah, it is still on a lower high, but I do think that this is a sort of setup that really does give it its chance to follow through here. But technically, you know, Cardano doesn't really do anything of interest as long as it's below about 87 cents. What is this right here? 86.5 cents. So, you know, I do think that it'll approach that region. If you can see a weekly closure above there, I do think Cardano should get a pretty sizable move. You know, extremely likely above $1. I would say at least $1.20, a buck and a quarter. The monthly time frame stochastic momentum oscillator is actually still positioned to the downside, although it's very close to flipping back up. So if it can finish the month above 73 cents, which right now it's just a half cent below that, then it will officially cross back onto the upside. And at that point, I would say it is going to be a foregone conclusion. You're going to see this thing back above, well above $1. I would say 1.25 to 1.30 at least, and you know, potential for this cycle maybe like 1.80 to $2 or so. But again, needs to close this month and finish July above 73 cents for that to be relevant, at least for me. And, you know, this would also be a trendline regression test as well. So we shall see how that one actually holds up. In fact, now that I recognize it, we got two competing things going on right here. But I would be looking at this as more than likely a bullish setup if that does occur. Now, of course, where would Cardano be bearish? Well, I mean, to be fair, when I go down to the daily time frame, you know, it's still held below the 200 simple on the daily, that white moving average right here. So where would I look at this as a confirmed failure? If this thing pops back down below about 66 cents and closes a daily below there, yeah, that would be my conditions for, hey, Cardano is an epic failure. Get ready for, I mean, just get ready for this thing to go down, go down generally. But until then, you know, like I said, given the context of this market and where we're at in the cycle, I think that this is really its chance. Anyways, yeah, we'll end this one on Bitcoin as always. Looking at the weekly HPDR for CME, I do want to call out the relevancy of the 38.2 level as of right now. Again, this one's closing on Friday, and that number is 122,120. I would go as far to say that if you do see Bitcoin pop back above there by end of week, that's a really, really strong signal that we're going to see, you know, 130 to 138. I don't know how soon after that, maybe in like the next month or so, you know, that does align with a lot of our other setups. But that would be the next sort of like major hurdle or major area of interest, if you want to call it that. As you can see here, I mean, you know, we're getting our first pullback on the 38.2 level. Not like super concerning for me just yet, but if we go down to a daily time frame, you know, I would say that there is concern for Bitcoin on this rally, like the legitimacy of this rally. If Bitcoin really comes back down below about 114.5 and closes the daily below there, that would be quite concerning to me. But I do want to call out something a little bit different that I usually don't speak about on this channel, or at least I don't speak about it often, but it's my secret chart. It's the Bitcoin versus Japanese yen chart. A lot of the time you'll see signals on this chart that just don't show up on Bitcoin versus the dollar. And a lot of the time, the one for the Japanese yen chart, they play out and and it typically has a very high hit rate. Anyways, I wanted to call this out right here. It's very, very simple, actually. If we look at the prior all-time high for Bitcoin, we can see that during this pullback, and again, I'm recording this video on the 15th of July, so things, naturally will change by the time it's posted. But if we look at this, if we look at this pullback thus far, it is just a retest of that prior all-time high, or very, very close to it. Maybe it goes a little bit lower than that. But I would say, as long as you're above there, like, again, I don't want to be getting aggressively bearish on Bitcoin or anything like this. The ranges are naturally massive at this point just because Bitcoin's at such a massive number. Again, a 1% move at this point is, more than $1,000 in price. And Bitcoin moves more than 1% on average, or sorry, it moves way more than 1% on average each and every day. In fact, closer to like 2 or 3% in most cases. So yeah, there's that as well. Just keep that in mind. Anyways, effectively, as long as Bitcoin's above that prior all-time high for the Japanese yen chart, I look at this as just a retest of the all-time highs, consolidation for a little bit, and then very likely does try higher. Perhaps it does fall through on this rising channel here. That could put you all the way up towards, 19,000 yens. I don't know what the fuck that equates to in dollars, but it does get marched up, obviously over time as well. So just an area of interest to be aware of if Bitcoin, assuming Bitcoin does continue on with this rally. But yeah, again, just focus on the higher term time frames for this video, calling out some of the important numbers. And we didn't really go over failure conditions for all of these things, but maybe we should go over that really quickly. What's XRP's failure condition? Well, back below $2.50, very problematic, or just anything that would force the monthly stochastic momentum oscillator to the downside. In fact, I'm just going to extend that statement for all of these. Look, if the monthly closes below the stochastic pivot, then okay, there's your warning signal, I suppose. Anyways, I think that's a good place maybe leaving off. Again, we are having a massive travel day today. It's probably going to take me at least another day or two to really recover from this. And so if you're trying to reach out or contact me or Elsa for that matter, please understand that we are massively inconvenienced right now from our usual setup. So we'll do our best to get back to you as always. But please give us a little bit of grace. And I think that we'll be in probably a good spot with good internet and everything. I would say in about 3 days. So probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday region should be good to go again and back on the ball. But for now, it's going to be a bit more difficult. As always, though, we'll do our best, and I'd like to wish you the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.